Hi there, it's Nicole for Simon Says Stamp, and today I have a card featuring new stamps and dies from the STAMPtember 2015 release. I've used the Tattered Poppies dies and colored them in with Distress inks, and then added a layered frame here with the stitched rectangles and stitched ovals dies, and then stamped a greeting with a new greeting stamp set. To start, I am going to die cut the Tattered Poppies from some watercolor cardstock. This is the Tim Holtz watercolor cardstock, and I'm using it today. It has a little bit of a texture to it, which I liked for this project. And I'm going to be using the Tim Holtz Distress inks to color in all of these dies, so I like how it all works together really nicely. Now, some of the dies, because they are so intricate and so delicate, are sticking in the die a little bit. I just take a straight pin and poke all of those out, and then I can get to coloring them. So once I have all of those punched out of here, I'll start adding the Distress ink. And I did end up die cutting the floral twice so that I could have two of these poppies on my card. Now, before I get to coloring it, I thought it would be a good idea to kind of figure out how I want to lay out the flower so I know where I want to color certain areas on each of the petals. I'm going to start with the Abandoned Coral Distress ink, and I'm going to ink up the outer edges of the petals with this ink. I'm doing it really fast. And it doesn't have to be really neat because I'm going to take my second color, which is going to be Barn Door, and I can blend the two together. So I'll add the Barn Door ink to the inside edge of the petal. And what doesn't blend out there, I can go back with the Abandoned Coral Distress ink foam and blend that back out. Now, these colors are very similar, but I didn't want a huge difference in color for these poppy floral petals. It's very, very subtle. Go ahead and finish adding that. Now, the colors look a little bit blotchy. I can go back in with the Abandoned Coral, but a lot of that's going to be taken care of after I spritz these with water from a mini mister. It's going to start getting those inks to move a little bit. And I started with a really light misting. Here in a little bit, I am going to go back and really spritz them with a heavy dose of water and let that ink mix together nicely. For the stems, I am using the Forest Moss Distress ink. And I decided not to blend two colors together. That's such a delicate little stem. But for the leaves, I am going to use the Crushed Olive and Forest Moss Distress inks together. And I apologize, I was zoomed in a little too close and didn't realize I was out of the frame as I was inking these. I'll move those up a little bit so you can see them a little bit better. So just a little two-tone for the leaves. Again, I'm going to color in a couple more of these. I ended up only using about 3. Here's where I'm going to really douse all of these pieces with a lot of water, and you can see that immediately the ink starts moving. And that's really going to allow for the petals to have a much smoother look once that dries. For the little inside portion of the floral, I am using Fossilized Amber, and then I am going to use Black Soot. For these little pieces here, I am not going to ink those with water. There's really no need to. I did kind of spritz the yellow, and I did go back and add even more water to the actual floral where I saw maybe it needed it a little bit. I have die cut a rectangle with the largest stitched rectangle die from Simon Says Stamp. And then on the Ranger Craft sheet, I'm taking Tumbled Glass, Salty Ocean, and Twisted Citron and really spritzing them with water. And then I'm going to take that rectangle that's die cut from watercolor cardstock and kind of move it around into that ink to add a watercolor looking background. I don't want it to look really neat. I want it to look really kind of messy And that looks pretty good there. If I need to pick up a little more color, I can. And then I'll set that aside to air dry as well. I let everything air dry. If you're in a hurry, go ahead and hit it with a heat tool. Next, I am going to use the same stitched rectangle that I just used, and also one of the new stitched oval dies to create a frame so I can frame up my floral or my florals and my stamped greeting. I was hoping I could die cut these together, but the oval overlapped the rectangle a little bit, so I did not do that because I didn't want to ruin my dies at all. So I'm going to go ahead and die cut 4 of these rectangles, and then I will take the oval, line it up so that I'm just eyeballing it, I didn't measure it, so that it's even there on all 4 sides, and I'll run it through, and this is going to give me 4 frames that I can stack one on top of another to create a dimensional frame for those florals and greeting. So once I have those die cut, I'm going to just take some adhesive and secure these one right on top of another. This is one of my favorite ways to create a dimensional frame. Now, these may not line up exactly perfectly, so where it's not lined up, that is going to be kind of where I can hide that with some of the die cuts, like the floral. It's not even that noticeable. It doesn't bother me that much, but if it would bother you, you can definitely hide it with other die cuts. I'm just using a nice strong adhesive. This is the Glue Glider Pro Permatack adhesive. A lot of times I'll use liquid adhesive, but it can be a little bit messy, so I just used this today. And that is going to give me that nice dimension. You can see it's very substantial. I'll layer it over my watercolor background. Now I'm not going to secure it yet because I want to stamp my greeting, but I don't want to stamp with that frame in the way, so I just use my pencil to kind of mark exactly where that frame is and added a little notch. And then I'm going to ink up this large Hugs greeting from the Big Hugs stamp set. I'm going to use black ink and stamp that right there on my watercolor background. A nice bold greeting. And then I'm going to take a little coordinating greeting to stamp above it that says sending you lots of, and then hugs. Once you pop that frame over it, you can really see how cute that's going to look. Go ahead and add some adhesive to my frame now. And then I can pop that right over the watercolor background. And that's also going to disguise some of those areas that maybe were dried a little funny, especially along the edges. And then I'm going to lay out all of these little delicate die cut pieces. Before I commit to securing any of these anywhere, particularly on this card, I want to make sure it's all going to fit. So I don't want to use a liquid glue that's going to make it permanent if it's not going to fit. So this allows me a little bit of play to make sure I like how everything's going to look. I'm going to put together my flowers. So I have them kind of put together here, but I decided that I thought some of the detail on the poppies disappeared with the watercolor inks. So I'm taking the Barn Door Distress Ink marker, which is one of the same colors I used for the petals themselves, and I drew over those die lines on the actual flower petals, and then I'm going over them with the Wink of Stella clear glitter brush marker. Because this is kind of a water-based marker, the Distress inks will react with that, and they'll blend out a little bit so they're not quite so harsh. Plus the glitter adds a nice fun touch to the flower petals. So I'm going to do this for all 10 flower petals, for 5 for each flower, and I think it really adds to the design of the flower petals and makes the flowers much more interesting to look at. So I'll just blend all of those out. I went over the lines where I drew first to blend them out, and then I went over the entire petal. And now I can go ahead and glue all of these pieces down. I'm using the Zig glue pen to glue most of these delicate little pieces. I'll start with both of my stems and some of the leaves. I ended up using just 3 of the leaves here. Try to get that little end to stick down there where it needs to stay, and it just keeps popping up. I like to use acrylic blocks to hold things down until the glue dries. They're something handy, and they're heavy enough that they usually hold everything down really nicely. Go ahead and start putting together the flower. I start with the 4 bigger flower petals first, kind of fan them out, if you will. Then add some glue to the center. We'll add these little pieces. And once you have all of this, it is pretty thick. So for that final floral piece, and to give just a tiny bit of dimension, I'm going to use a kind of flatter foam adhesive under those petals, and then stick that right on top. And I'll do that for both of the flowers. Finally, I'm going to go over the word hugs with the Wink of Stella clear glitter brush marker. Give it a little sparkle and shine too. And then I will glue this whole panel to a card base. This is one of the new card bases available from Simon Says Stamp for STAMPtember. I'm going to center that right on that top folding card. Flip it over and trim off any of that overhang because that won't fit in an envelope. And that will finish up my card. Thanks for watching this video showcasing new stamps and dies for Simon Says Stamp STAMPtember release. The supplies I've used are listed and linked below the video on YouTube. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.